Billionaire accuses Black Maid of beating his daughter, but the girl's words stun the court. The gavel struck 3 times, each blow echoing through Willowbrook County Superior Court like gunshots. Amara Baptiste sat perfectly still in the defendant's chair, her dark hands folded in her lap, watching as the man who had once trusted her with his most precious possession now pointed an accusing finger across the courtroom. "Your Honor," Thaddeus Ashworth's voice carried the authority of old money and older prejudices. "This woman has violated the sacred trust of my household. She has harmed my daughter." But neither the billionaire nor his army of lawyers could have predicted what 7-year-old Lily Ashworth would whisper into the microphone that Tuesday morning. 3 words that would shatter a family's carefully constructed lies and reveal a love so pure it would transform them all. What do you think those 3 words could be? Share your guess in the comments below. Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from and how this story touched you. 6 months earlier, Thornfield Heights stood like a monument to American wealth, its limestone facade gleaming in the Connecticut morning sun. Inside the estate's pristine walls, 2 very different women prepared for another day in their carefully choreographed dance of employer and employee. Amara Baptiste moved through the mansion's corridors with the quiet efficiency of someone who had learned to make herself invisible. At 34, she possessed a dignity that no amount of scrubbing floors could diminish. Her grandmother's silver cross caught the light as she arranged fresh peonies in the grand foyer, each movement deliberate and graceful. She paused at the family portrait dominating the entrance hall. Thaddeus Ashworth in his tailored suit, his late wife Catherine's gentle smile, and between them, little Lily with eyes too old for her 6 years. Amara's fingers traced the frame's edge, remembering Catherine's final words. "Promise me you'll watch over her. Promise me she'll know love." 3 floors above, Thaddeus stood in his home office, phone pressed to his ear as he orchestrated another corporate acquisition. The view from his window encompassed rolling hills and manicured gardens, but his eyes saw only numbers, profit margins, and the next deal. At 42, he had built an empire on steel and determination, yet the one thing that mattered most, his daughter's laughter, had become as foreign to him as failure. "Sir?" Mrs. Delacroix's voice interrupted his call. The head housekeeper stood in the doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "Miss Lily is asking for you again." Thaddeus covered the phone's mouthpiece. "Tell her I'll be down later. I'm in the middle of something important. She's been asking every morning for 3 weeks, sir. And I've been busy for 3 weeks, Margaret. That's what pays for this house." He turned back to the window, dismissing her with a wave. Mrs. Delacroix's lips pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. She had worked for the Ashworth family for 15 years, had watched Catherine's slow decline and Thaddeus's retreat into work after her death. She had also watched Amara Baptiste become the mother figure that Lily desperately needed. In the mansion's east wing, Lily Ashworth sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, surrounded by coloring books and broken crayons. Her dark hair fell in waves around her shoulders, and her green eyes, so much like her mother's, held a sadness that no child should carry. "Miss Amara?" Lily's voice was barely above a whisper as the maid entered with fresh linens. "Yes, little star?" Amara knelt beside the girl, using the pet name that always brought a smile to Lily's face. "Daddy said he'd take me to see the horses today. Do you think he remembered?" Amara's heart clenched. She had heard Thaddeus on 3 different conference calls that morning, none of them mentioning horses or daughters. "Sometimes grown-ups get very busy, sweetheart. But that doesn't mean they don't love you. Mama used to say that too." Lily picked up a purple crayon and began coloring outside the lines of a butterfly. "But she's not here anymore, and Daddy, he looks at me like I make him sad." The honesty in the child's voice nearly broke Amara's composure. She sat fully on the floor, her uniform skirt spreading around her like a dark flower. "You know what I think? I think your daddy loves you so much it scares him. Sometimes when people are scared, they run away, even from the things they love most. Like when I'm scared of thunderstorms? Exactly like that. But you know what helps with thunderstorms?" Lily shook her head, her attention fully captured. "Having someone brave sit with you until they pass. Amara reached over and straightened one of Lily's hair ribbons. "And I'll always sit with you, little star. Through every storm." The promise hung in the air between them, sacred and unbreakable. Neither of them could have known that in 6 months, that promise would be tested in ways they never imagined. Downstairs, Thaddeus finally ended his call and glanced at his Rolex. It was past noon. He had missed lunch with Lily again. A familiar knot of guilt twisted in his stomach, the same feeling that had plagued him since Catherine's funeral. Every time he looked at his daughter, he saw his wife's eyes, heard her voice, felt the crushing weight of his failure to save her. The doctors had said there was nothing anyone could have done. Pancreatic cancer was swift and merciless. But Thaddeus knew better. He had been too busy building his empire to notice Catherine's fatigue, too focused on the next acquisition to see her growing pale. By the time they caught it, she had weeks, not years. "I should have been there," he whispered to the empty office, the same words he had repeated every day for 8 months. A burst of laughter from the garden drew his attention to the window. Below, he could see Lily chasing butterflies while Amara watched from a nearby bench, her face lit with genuine joy. The sight should have warmed him, but instead it sparked something darker, resentment that a stranger could bring his daughter happiness when he could not. He didn't see the gentle way Amara guided Lily away from the rose thorns, or how she applauded when the little girl successfully caught a butterfly only to immediately set it free. He didn't notice the careful attention Amara paid to every scrape, every tear, every moment of wonder. All Thaddeus saw was his own inadequacy reflected in their easy companionship, and like a man drowning in his own guilt, he began to resent the very person keeping his daughter afloat. The stage was set for a tragedy born of grief, prejudice, and the dangerous assumption that love could be measured in dollars rather than devotion. The scream that shattered the Tuesday morning silence at Thornfield Heights would haunt Amara Baptiste for the rest of her life. She was in the laundry room, folding Lily's school uniforms with the same meticulous care she applied to everything in the Ashworth household, when the sound pierced through the mansion's thick walls. It wasn't the typical cry of a child who had scraped a knee or lost a toy. This was primal, terrified, the sound of a soul in agony. Amara dropped the tiny plaid skirt and ran, her heart hammering against her ribs as she took the marble stairs 3 at a time. The screaming continued, echoing from Lily's bedroom, punctuated now by violent sobbing that made Amara's blood turn to ice. She burst through the bedroom door to find Lily convulsing on her canopy bed, her small body rigid with terror, eyes rolled back until only the whites showed. Foam flecked the corners of her mouth, and her hands clawed at the air as if fighting off invisible demons. "Lily! Baby, I'm here!" Amara rushed to the bed, her training from her younger sister's epilepsy kicking in. She gently turned Lily onto her side, protecting her head with a pillow while speaking in the soothing voice that had calmed countless storms. "You're safe, little star. Amara's here. You're safe." The seizure lasted 93 seconds. Amara counted every one, before Lily's body finally went limp. The child's breathing was ragged, her face pale as moonlight, but her eyes slowly focused on Amara's face hovering above her. "Miss Amara?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper, confused and frightened. "What happened? Why does my head hurt?" "You had a seizure, sweetheart. But you're okay now. I'm going to call your daddy and the doctor, all right?" Amara reached for her phone with trembling fingers, but before she could dial, heavy footsteps thundered down the hallway. Thaddeus appeared in the doorway, his face flushed from running, his usually perfect hair disheveled. "What the hell is going on? I heard screaming from my office." His words died as he took in the scene, his daughter lying pale and disoriented on the bed, Amara kneeling beside her with protective arms around the child's shoulders. "She had a seizure, Mr. Ashworth. We need to call Dr. Morrison immediately." But Thaddeus wasn't looking at his daughter. His eyes were fixed on Amara's hands, and specifically on her right knuckles, which bore fresh scratches from where Lily had accidentally clawed her during the convulsions. "Get away from her." His voice was low, dangerous. "Sir? I said get away from my daughter." Thaddeus moved toward the bed, his face a mask of cold fury. "What did you do to her?" Amara's blood chilled. "Mr. Ashworth, I found her having a seizure. I was helping." "Helping?" He gestured to his daughter's disheveled appearance, the tear-stained cheeks, the way Lily seemed to shrink into herself. "This is what you call helping. Daddy! Lily's small voice cut through the tension. Miss Amara saved me. I was scared and she. Don't speak. Thaddeus's command was sharp enough to make both females flinch. He knelt beside the bed, his hands hovering over his daughter as if afraid to touch her. Lily, I need you to tell me the truth. Did this woman hurt you? The question hung in the air like poison. Amara felt the world tilt beneath her feet as she watched the man she had served faithfully for 2 years look at her with the same suspicion he might reserve for a stranger who had broken into his home. Mr. Ashworth, please. Your daughter needs medical attention. We can discuss this after. We'll discuss this now. He pulled out his phone, but instead of calling Dr. Morrison, he dialed 911. I need police and an ambulance at Thornfield Heights. My daughter has been assaulted. No. The word tore from Amara's throat. You know me. You know I would never. I know you're the help. His voice carried the weight of generations of privilege and prejudice. I know my daughter was fine this morning, and now she's traumatized. I know you have scratches on your hands, and she has bruises on her arms. Amara looked down at Lily's arms and saw the faint marks that seizures often left, the result of muscle contractions, not violence. But she could see how they might look to someone determined to find guilt. Those are from the seizure, when muscles contract violently. Don't. Thaddeus stood, placing himself between Amara and Lily like a shield. Don't you dare try to explain away what I can see with my own eyes. Mrs. Delacroix appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. Her face went white as she took in the scene. Mr. Ashworth, what's happening? Call my lawyer. Tell him we'll need representation for a criminal case. He never took his eyes off Amara. And call Dr. Morrison. Tell him to meet us at the hospital. Sir, if I may, Mrs. Delacroix stepped forward carefully. Miss Baptiste has been nothing but devoted to Miss Lily. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding was mine, thinking I could trust someone like her with my daughter. The words hit Amara like physical blows. Someone like her. In those 4 words, she heard every stereotype, every assumption, every reason why a black woman in a white household would always be suspect first and human second. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Lily began to cry again, confused and frightened by the tension crackling between the adults. She reached for Amara, the person who had comforted her through countless nightmares and fears. Miss Amara, don't go. Please don't go. But Thaddeus caught his daughter's hand, pulling it back. She's not your friend, Lily. She's not family. She's just someone we pay to clean our house. The cruelty of the statement, delivered in front of the child who had called Amara her guardian angel, was breathtaking in its precision. Amara felt something break inside her chest, not just her heart but her faith in the goodness she had tried so hard to see in this broken family. As the paramedics rushed up the stairs and police officers filled the hallway, Amara Baptiste stood in the center of the storm she had not created but would be blamed for. She looked one last time at Lily, memorizing the child's face, knowing it might be the last time she would see her little star. I love you, she whispered, too quietly for anyone but Lily to hear. And in that moment, as handcuffs clicked around her wrists and her rights were read in the bedroom where she had sung lullabies and chased away monsters, Amara Baptiste learned that love was not always enough to protect you from the world's cruelty. Have you ever been wrongly accused of something? How did it feel? Share your experience in the comments. The Willowbrook County Jail smelled of disinfectant and despair. Amara Baptiste sat on the narrow cot in her holding cell, still wearing the gray uniform she had put on that morning to serve breakfast to a family she thought she knew. Her hands, now free of handcuffs, trembled as she stared at the scratches on her knuckles, evidence that would be twisted into proof of a crime she never committed. Across town, in the sterile corridors of Willowbrook General Hospital, Thaddeus paced outside his daughter's room like a caged animal. Dr. Morrison had confirmed what Amara had tried to tell him. Lily had suffered a complex partial seizure, likely triggered by stress and sleep deprivation. The bruises on her arms were consistent with muscle contractions, not abuse. But Thaddeus couldn't hear the doctor's words over the roar of his own guilt and rage. To admit that Amara was innocent meant admitting that he had failed his daughter so completely that her body had rebelled against the neglect. It meant acknowledging that a woman he had dismissed as the help had been more of a parent to Lily than he had been since Catherine's death. Mr. Ashworth? Dr. Morrison's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. I need to discuss Lily's condition with you. Thaddeus stopped pacing, his jaw set in the stubborn line that had served him well in boardrooms but was useless against medical facts. Is she going to be okay? Physically, yes. The seizure has passed and her brain scans are normal. But I'm concerned about the underlying causes. Dr. Morrison consulted his tablet, his expression grave. When did you first notice signs of stress in your daughter? Stress? She's 6 years old. What could she possibly be stressed about? The doctor's eyebrows rose slightly. Children are remarkably sensitive to their environment, Mr. Ashworth. Has there been any significant change in her routine? Any trauma or loss? Thaddeus's hands clenched into fists. Her mother died 8 months ago. I see. And how has Lily been coping with that loss? Fine. She's been fine. The words came out too quickly, too defensive. She has everything she needs. The best schools, the best clothes, the best. What about emotional support? Counseling? Someone to talk to about her feelings? The question hit like a physical blow. Thaddeus thought of all the nights he had worked late while Lily ate dinner alone, all the mornings he had left before she woke up, all the times Mrs. Delacroix had told him his daughter was asking for him. She has the staff. They take good care of her. The staff. Dr. Morrison made a note. I understand you've accused one of your employees of harming Lily. Can you tell me about that relationship? Thaddeus's face darkened. That woman was supposed to be helping her, and instead... Instead what exactly? Because the injuries you described are entirely consistent with seizure activity. There's no evidence of external trauma. You didn't see what I saw. Thaddeus's voice rose, drawing stares from passing nurses. You didn't see my daughter's terror, or the way that woman was hovering over her. Mr. Ashworth, in my experience, children who have been abused don't typically reach for their abusers during medical crises. Yet according to the paramedics' report, your daughter repeatedly asked for Miss Amara, and became more agitated when told she couldn't see her. The words hung between them like an accusation. Thaddeus felt the careful wall he had built around his guilt beginning to crack, but he reinforced it with anger. Anger was easier than admitting he had destroyed an innocent woman's life to protect his own fragile ego. I know what I saw, he repeated, but his voice lacked conviction. Meanwhile, in the county jail, Amara sat across from Isaiah Monroe, the public defender assigned to her case. He was younger than she had expected, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses and the slightly rumpled appearance of someone who cared more about justice than appearances. Miss Baptiste, I need you to walk me through exactly what happened this morning. Amara's voice was steady as she recounted finding Lily in the throes of a seizure, her training kicking in, the way she had protected the child until the episode passed. But when she reached the part about Thaddeus's accusations, her composure cracked. He looked at me like I was a monster, she whispered. This man who trusted me to care for his daughter, who let me into his home, who knew how much I loved that little girl. He looked at me like I was capable of hurting her. Isaiah leaned forward, his expression gentle but determined. Miss Baptiste, I've reviewed the medical reports. Dr. Morrison's findings support your account completely. This case should never have been filed. Then why am I sitting in a jail cell? The question hung heavy between them. They both knew the answer, even if neither wanted to say it aloud. A wealthy white man's word against a black domestic worker's. In some corners of the world, that equation still tilted toward predetermined guilt. Because sometimes the system fails, Isaiah said quietly. But that doesn't mean we stop fighting. Tell me about your relationship with Lily. For the first time since her arrest, Amara's face softened. She's like the daughter I never had. Her mother, Mrs. Catherine, she made me promise to watch over Lily before she died. That little girl has been through so much loss, and her father. She shook her head. He loves her, I know he does, but he's drowning in his own grief. He can't see past his own pain to help hers. And you stepped in. Someone had to. Amara's voice grew fierce. Someone had to read her bedtime stories and hold her when she had nightmares about her mama. Someone had to celebrate her small victories and dry her tears when her daddy was too busy to notice she was crying. Isaiah made notes, but his expression was troubled. Miss Baptiste, I have to ask, have you ever lost your temper with Lily? Ever felt frustrated or overwhelmed? Never. The answer came without hesitation. That child is pure light in a world that's tried to dim her shine. I would die before I let anyone hurt her, including myself." The conviction in her voice was absolute, and Isaiah found himself believing every word. But belief wouldn't be enough in a courtroom where prejudice wore the mask of justice. Back at the hospital, Lily had finally awakened fully. She sat propped up against pillows, her green eyes scanning the room with growing confusion and distress. "Daddy, where's Miss Amara?" "I want to see Miss Amara." Thaddeus felt his chest tighten. "She can't come see you right now, sweetheart." "Why not? Is she sick too?" The innocent question was a knife to his heart. How could he explain to his 6-year-old daughter that he had destroyed the one person who had shown her unconditional love? How could he tell her that his own cowardice had torn away her greatest source of comfort? She's not working for us anymore." Lily's face crumpled. "But she promised she'd always be here. She promised she'd sit with me through every storm." The words, Amara's words, spoken with love and devotion, shattered something inside Thaddeus. But instead of facing the truth, he doubled down on his lie. "Sometimes people break their promises, Lily. Sometimes people aren't who we think they are." But even as he spoke the words, Thaddeus knew he was describing himself, not Amara Baptiste. And somewhere deep in his heart, beneath layers of grief and pride and fear, he began to suspect that he had made the most terrible mistake of his life. What would you do if you realized you had wrongly accused someone? Is it ever too late to make things right? Let us know your thoughts. The arraignment hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning, 2 days after Amara's arrest. As she sat in the defendant's chair, wearing an ill-fitting public defender's suit that Isaiah had borrowed from a colleague, she felt the weight of every stare in the packed courtroom. Word had spread through Willowbrook's social circles like wildfire. The Ashworth family scandal was the kind of gossip that wealthy communities devoured with barely concealed glee. Thaddeus sat in the front row behind the prosecutor's table, his Armani suit immaculate, his face a mask of righteous determination. But his hands betrayed him, trembling slightly as he gripped the wooden bench. He had spent the past 2 days trying to convince himself he was doing the right thing, but Lily's tears and repeated pleas for Miss Amara had worn down his resolve like water against stone. Judge Victoria Sterling entered the courtroom with the bearing of someone who had seen every form of human cruelty and still believed in justice. At 62, she was known for her sharp intellect and her refusal to be swayed by wealth or status. Her dark eyes swept the courtroom, taking in the obvious divide between the expensive suits on one side and the modest clothing on the other. "The state of Connecticut versus Amara Baptiste," the clerk announced. "Charges of assault in the 3rd degree and risk of injury to a child." Isaiah Monroe stood, his voice clear and confident despite the David versus Goliath nature of the case. "Your Honor, my client pleads not guilty to all charges. Furthermore, we request that all charges be dismissed based on the medical evidence that clearly contradicts the allegations." District Attorney Harrison Vale rose from the prosecution table, his silver hair gleaming under the courtroom lights. He had built his career on high-profile cases, and the Ashworth name carried enough weight to ensure media attention. "Your Honor, the state believes the evidence will show that the defendant violated the sacred trust placed in her by this family. We request that bail be set at $50,000. $50,000? Isaiah's voice cracked with indignation. "Your Honor, my client is a domestic worker with no criminal record, no history of violence, and deep ties to this community. She poses no flight risk whatsoever." Judge Sterling studied the case file, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Vale, I've reviewed Dr. Morrison's medical report. His findings seem to contradict your allegations. Would you care to explain?" Vale's jaw tightened. "Your Honor, medical evidence can be interpreted in many ways. We have an eyewitness, the child's father, who saw the defendant in a compromising position with clear evidence of a struggle. A struggle that consisted of my client preventing a seizing child from injuring herself," Isaiah countered. "The scratches on Miss Baptiste's hands are defensive wounds from a child in medical distress, not evidence of assault." Judge Sterling's gaze shifted to Thaddeus, who had been sitting rigidly throughout the exchange. "Mr. Ashworth, would you please approach the bench?" Thaddeus stood on unsteady legs, his confidence evaporating under the judge's scrutiny. As he walked forward, he caught sight of Amara for the first time since her arrest. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the ordeal, but her dignity remained intact. When their eyes met, he saw no hatred there, only a profound sadness that cut him deeper than any accusation could have. "Mr. Ashworth," Judge Sterling's voice was measured but firm, "I understand you've suffered a tremendous loss with your wife's passing. I also understand that as a parent, your first instinct is to protect your child. But I need you to think very carefully about what you actually witnessed that morning." Thaddeus felt the courtroom's attention like a physical weight. I saw my daughter in distress, and this woman was there with scratches on her hands." "Did you see Miss Baptiste strike your daughter?" The question hung in the air like a sword. Thaddeus opened his mouth to say yes, to maintain the lie that had brought them all to this moment, but the word wouldn't come. No, I didn't see that specifically. Did you see any action that could be construed as violent or abusive?" Again, silence. In his mind, Thaddeus replayed that terrible morning. Amara kneeling protectively beside Lily, speaking in soothing tones, her face etched with genuine concern. Even in his rage and fear, he had to admit that nothing about her demeanor had suggested violence. "No," he whispered, the admission barely audible. Judge Sterling nodded slowly. "Mr. Ashworth, I'm going to make an unusual request. I want you and Miss Baptiste to participate in a mediated discussion before this case proceeds further. Sometimes, in the heat of trauma and grief, we make assumptions that don't serve justice." "Your Honor," Vale interjected, "that's highly irregular. So is prosecuting someone based on medical evidence that contradicts the charges?" Judge Sterling cut him off. "Mr. Monroe, does your client consent to mediation?" Isaiah looked at Amara, who nodded slowly. Despite everything, she still believed in the possibility of truth prevailing. "She consents, Your Honor." "Mr. Ashworth?" Thaddeus felt trapped between his pride and a growing certainty that he had made a catastrophic mistake. The thought of sitting across from Amara, of looking into the eyes of the woman he had destroyed, filled him with dread. But Judge Sterling's expectant gaze left him no choice. Yes, Your Honor." "Excellent. I'm ordering a 48-hour mediation period. Both parties will remain in the courthouse mediation center until this matter is resolved. Miss Baptiste, you'll be released on your own recognizance pending the outcome." As the gavel fell, Amara felt a mixture of relief and terror. Freedom, even temporary, was a gift she hadn't dared hope for. But the prospect of facing Thaddeus Ashworth, of trying to make him see the truth he had willfully ignored, seemed almost impossible. An hour later, they sat in the courthouse's small mediation room, a neutral space designed to facilitate difficult conversations. The mediator, Dr. Elena Vasquez, was a soft-spoken woman with kind eyes and an air of infinite patience. "Before we begin," Dr. Vasquez said, "I want both of you to understand that this is a safe space. Nothing said here can be used in court proceedings. This is about truth, not legal strategy." Thaddeus stared at his hands, unable to meet Amara's gaze. The woman he had accused of harming his daughter sat across from him with quiet dignity, waiting for him to find the courage to face what he had done. "Mr. Ashworth," Dr. Vasquez continued gently, "would you like to start by telling us what you were feeling that morning when you found your daughter in distress?" The question opened a floodgate Thaddeus had been desperately trying to keep closed. For the first time in months, he was forced to confront not just what he had seen, but what he had felt, and why he had been so quick to blame the one person who had shown his daughter unconditional love. The truth was about to emerge, whether he was ready for it or not. The silence in the mediation room stretched like a taut wire until Thaddeus finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was terrified." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward slightly. "Can you tell us more about that fear?" Thaddeus's hands clenched and unclenched in his lap. "When I heard Lily screaming, it was the same sound she made the night Catherine died. The same helpless, terrified crying." His voice cracked. "I ran to her room that night 8 months ago, and she was gone. Just gone. And Lily was standing beside the bed, screaming for her mama." Amara's breath caught. She had known Catherine had died at home, but she had never heard the details. The image of 6-year-old Lily discovering her mother's body sent a wave of protective anguish through her chest. "So when you heard that sound again," Dr. Vasquez prompted gently, "I thought I was losing her too." Thaddeus finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed with unshed tears. I thought someone was taking away the only piece of Catherine I had left. And when you saw Miss Baptiste with Lily? Thaddeus's gaze shifted to Amara, and for the first time, she saw past his anger to the broken man beneath. I saw someone who could comfort my daughter when I couldn't. Someone who could make her smile when I only seemed to make her cry. And I hated that. I hated that a stranger could be a better parent to my child than I was. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Amara felt tears prick her eyes, not for herself but for this man who had been drowning in grief and guilt for so long that he had forgotten how to love without fear. "Mr. Ashworth," Dr. Vasquez said softly, "it sounds like you were projecting your own feelings of inadequacy onto Miss Baptiste. Is that possible?" "I don't know." Thaddeus rubbed his face with both hands. "All I know is that when I saw those scratches on her hands, it was easier to believe she was the problem than to admit that I was." Dr. Vasquez turned to Amara. "Miss Baptiste, how does it feel to hear this?" Amara was quiet for a long moment, choosing her words carefully. "It hurts," she said finally, "but not in the way you might think. It hurts because I understand it." Both Thaddeus and Dr. Vasquez looked surprised. "You see," Amara continued, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes, "I know what it's like to lose someone you love and feel like you failed them. I know what it's like to be so consumed by guilt that you can't see straight." She took a deep breath, steeling herself for a story she had never told anyone in the Ashworth household. "I had a daughter once. Her name was Zoe, and she would have been 9 years old this year." Thaddeus's head snapped up, his eyes wide with shock. "She was born when I was 24, and her father, well, he wasn't ready to be a father. It was just me and Zoe against the world." Amara's voice grew soft with memory. She was the most beautiful, brilliant little girl. Always asking questions, always wanting to help with everything. She used to say she was going to be a doctor so she could fix everyone who was hurting. Dr. Vasquez waited patiently as Amara gathered her strength to continue. "When Zoe was 4, she got sick. What we thought was just a cold turned into pneumonia, and then complications. I was working 3 jobs trying to keep us afloat, and I couldn't afford the best doctors, the best hospitals. I did everything I could, but it wasn't enough." Tears flowed freely down Amara's cheeks now, but her voice remained steady. "She died in my arms at County General, and the last thing she said to me was, 'Mama, don't be sad. I'll wait for you in heaven with the angels.'" Thaddeus felt like he had been punched in the chest. This woman, whom he had accused of harming a child, had lost her own daughter. The cruelty of it was staggering. "After Zoe died," Amara continued, "I couldn't function for months. I blamed myself for everything, for not having enough money, for not recognizing the signs sooner, for not being able to save her. I was angry at God, angry at the world, angry at every parent who still had their children when mine was gone." "What changed?" Dr. Vasquez asked gently. "Mrs. Catherine." Amara's face softened at the memory. "I started working for the Ashworths about a year after Zoe's death. I was still broken, still carrying all that guilt and anger. But Mrs. Catherine, she saw something in me that I couldn't see in myself." Amara looked directly at Thaddeus now, her eyes filled with compassion rather than accusation. "Your wife was dying, Mr. Ashworth, but she spent her last months trying to heal me. She would sit with me in the kitchen after Lily went to bed, and she would listen to me talk about Zoe. She never tried to fix me or tell me everything happened for a reason. She just listened." Thaddeus's throat felt tight. He remembered those evenings when Catherine would disappear into the kitchen, claiming she wanted to check on dinner preparations. He had never known she was counseling their grieving housekeeper. "The night before she died," Amara continued, "Mrs. Catherine called me to her room. She was so weak she could barely speak, but she took my hand and she said, 'Amara, I know you think you failed Zoe, but you didn't. You loved her completely, and that love doesn't die just because she did. I need you to take that love and give it to Lily. She's going to need someone who understands loss, someone who knows how precious and fragile life is.'" The room was completely silent except for the sound of quiet weeping. Thaddeus realized he was crying, for Catherine, for this woman's lost daughter, for his own failures as a father. "So when you accused me of hurting Lily," Amara said, her voice barely above a whisper, "it wasn't just my freedom you were threatening. It was my promise to your wife, my chance to honor Zoe's memory by protecting another little girl who needed love." Thaddeus looked at this woman, really looked at her, for the first time. He saw the strength it had taken to love again after losing everything. He saw the courage it required to open her heart to another child, knowing how devastating loss could be. He saw the grace with which she had endured his accusations, even understanding the pain that drove them. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words inadequate but necessary. "God, Amara, I'm so sorry." But Amara wasn't finished. "There's something else you need to know, Mr. Ashworth." Something about the morning Lily had her seizure. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small, worn photograph. A little black girl with bright eyes and a gap-toothed smile, wearing a doctor's costume that was clearly too big for her. "This is Zoe. And this," she said, pulling out a second photograph, "is what Lily drew for me the day before her seizure." The second image was a child's drawing in crayon, two stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. One was labeled Miss Amara, and the other Lily. At the bottom, in careful 6-year-old handwriting, were the words, "My new family." Thaddeus stared at the drawing, understanding flooding through him like a dam breaking. Lily hadn't just been asking for Amara during her medical crisis. She had been calling for the person she considered her mother. And he had torn that bond apart with his own selfish fear. The revelation of Lily's drawing hung between them like a bridge neither had expected to find. Thaddeus stared at the crayon masterpiece, seeing his daughter's desperate need for maternal love rendered in bright, hopeful colors. The word family seemed to pulse on the paper, written in the careful letters of a child who had found something precious and wanted to name it. "She drew this the night before her seizure," Amara said softly, her fingers tracing the edge of the photograph. "She was so excited to show it to me. She said she had been thinking about what family meant, and she decided that family wasn't just people who looked like you or shared your blood. Family was people who loved you no matter what." Dr. Vasquez watched the exchange with professional interest, noting how Thaddeus's rigid posture had begun to soften, how the defensive walls he had built were slowly crumbling. "Mr. Ashworth," she said gently, "how does it feel to see this drawing?" Thaddeus couldn't speak for a moment. When he finally found his voice, it was thick with emotion. "It feels like I've been blind. Like I've been so focused on my own pain that I couldn't see hers." He looked up at Amara, and for the first time since Catherine's death, he allowed himself to be vulnerable. "I used to watch you with her sometimes from my office window. I'd see you in the garden, teaching her about flowers, or sitting on the porch reading stories. And instead of being grateful that someone cared for her so deeply, I was jealous." "Jealous?" Amara's voice held no judgment, only curiosity. "You made it look so easy. Loving her, I mean. You never seemed afraid that you'd say the wrong thing, or do something that would remind her of Catherine. You just loved her." His voice broke slightly. "And I couldn't figure out how to do that anymore." Amara leaned forward, her eyes filled with understanding. "Mr. Ashworth, Thaddeus, loving someone after loss isn't easy for anyone. The difference is that I had already learned the hardest lesson there is. That love doesn't make us weak or vulnerable. It makes us brave." "How can you say that? You lost your daughter. How did that make you brave?" Amara was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "Because loving Zoe, even knowing I might lose her, was the most courageous thing I ever did. And when I did lose her, I had two choices. I could close my heart forever, or I could honor her memory by loving again." She pulled out another photograph, this one of Lily and herself from the previous Christmas. They were decorating cookies in the kitchen, both covered in flour, both laughing. "When I chose to love Lily, I wasn't replacing Zoe. I was continuing her legacy. Every time I comforted Lily through a nightmare, every time I celebrated her small victories, I was showing the world that my daughter's love lives on." Thaddeus studied the photograph, seeing the pure joy on both faces. "I never knew you felt that way. I never asked about your life before us. Most employers don't," Amara said without bitterness. "But Catherine did. She wanted to know about Zoe, about my dreams, about what made me laugh. She saw me as a whole person, not just someone who cleaned her house." "Tell me about her," Thaddeus said suddenly. "Tell me about Zoe." The request surprised both Amara and Dr. Vasquez. It was the first time Thaddeus had shown genuine interest in someone else's pain rather than his own. Amara's face lit up with the special glow that comes from talking about a beloved child. She was stubborn, just like Lily. Once she decided she wanted something, there was no talking her out of it. When she was 3, she decided she was going to be a vegetarian because she didn't want to hurt animals. I tried to explain that she needed protein to grow, but she just crossed her little arms and said, "Mama, beans have protein too." Thaddeus found himself smiling despite everything. "How did you know that?" "I didn't. She did. That child read everything she could get her hands on. She taught herself to read when she was 4 because she was tired of waiting for me to finish my shifts to read to her." Amara's voice grew wistful. She would have loved Lily. They're so much alike, curious, kind, determined to fix everything that's broken in the world. "Is that why you connected with Lily so quickly?" Amara nodded. "The first time I met her, she was sitting in the garden crying because she had found a bird with a broken wing. She was trying to make it a little splint out of popsicle sticks. It was exactly something Zoe would have done." Dr. Vasquez interjected gently. "Thaddeus, how does it feel to hear about the similarities between your daughter and Zoe?" "It makes me understand why Amara loves her so much," he said slowly. "And it makes me realize that Lily having someone who understands her so deeply isn't a threat to me. It's a gift." The admission seemed to surprise him as much as anyone else. "There's something I need to tell you," Thaddeus continued, his voice growing stronger. "The night Catherine died, I made her a promise too. I promised I would take care of Lily, that I would make sure she knew how much her mother loved her. But I've been so afraid of failing that I stopped trying altogether." He looked directly at Amara. "You've been keeping both our promises, mine and Catherine's. You've been the parent Lily needed when I was too broken to be one." Amara felt tears spring to her eyes. "I never wanted to replace you, Thaddeus. I just wanted to help her feel less alone. I know that now. And I know something else. Lily needs both of us. She needs someone who remembers her mother's laugh, and someone who can teach her that love doesn't end with death. She needs her father, and she needs you." For the first time since the nightmare began, Amara allowed herself to hope. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when we walk out of this room, I want to drop all charges. I want to ask you to come home. And I want to learn how to be the father Lily deserves, with your help." Dr. Vasquez smiled, recognizing the breakthrough she had been hoping for. "And how do you think Lily would feel about that?" Thaddeus pulled out his phone and showed them a text from Mrs. Delacroix. "Miss Lily hasn't eaten in 2 days. She keeps asking when Miss Amara is coming home. She says the house feels empty without her." Amara's hand flew to her heart. "She's not eating?" "She's grieving," Thaddeus said quietly. "Just like I was. Just like you were when you lost Zoe. She's lost another person she loves, and she doesn't understand why." "Then we need to go to her," Amara said, standing up with sudden urgency. "We need to show her that sometimes, when things break, they can be put back together even stronger than before." Thaddeus stood as well, and for the first time in days, his face held something that looked like peace. "Together?" Amara smiled, the first genuine smile she had worn since her arrest. "Together." As they prepared to leave the mediation room, both of them transformed by truth and forgiveness, neither could have predicted the final test that awaited them in the courthouse hallway, or the 3 words that would soon change everything. The courthouse hallway buzzed with activity as Thaddeus and Amara emerged from the mediation room, their faces reflecting the fragile hope of 2 people who had found their way back from the brink of destruction. Dr. Vasquez walked beside them, carrying the paperwork that would officially dismiss all charges against Amara Baptiste. But their moment of peace shattered the instant they saw the crowd gathered near the main entrance. "There she is," a voice cut through the din like a blade. "That's the woman who attacked the Ashworth child." Amara froze as camera flashes exploded around them. A pack of reporters surged forward, microphones thrust toward her face like weapons. Behind them, a growing crowd of onlookers pressed closer, their faces twisted with the ugly curiosity that feeds on scandal. "Miss Baptiste, is it true you have a history of violence? Mr. Ashworth, do you stand by your accusations? How does it feel to know your daughter was hurt by someone you trusted?" Thaddeus stepped protectively in front of Amara, his face pale with shock. "No comment. We have no comment." But the damage was already being done. In the crowd, Amara spotted several faces she recognized. Parents from Lily's school, members of the country club where she had occasionally worked catering events, neighbors from her own modest apartment complex. Their expressions ranged from disgust to pity to the kind of righteous anger that comes from believing the worst about someone. "Child abuser," someone shouted from the back of the crowd. "She should be locked up. How could they let her near children?" Each word hit Amara like a physical blow. She had known that her arrest would become public knowledge, but seeing the hatred in these strangers' faces, hearing herself reduced to a monster in their minds, was more devastating than she had imagined. "We need to get out of here," Thaddeus said urgently, taking her arm. But as they tried to push through the crowd, a new voice rose above the chaos, one that made Amara's blood turn to ice. "I always knew there was something wrong with that woman." Amara turned to see Vivian Hartwell, the head of the Parent-Teacher Association at Lily's school, speaking directly to a news camera. Vivian was everything Amara was not: wealthy, white, and wielding the kind of social power that could destroy reputations with a whisper. "I tried to warn Mr. Ashworth months ago," Vivian continued, her voice dripping with false concern. "I told him it was inappropriate to have someone like that around his daughter. These people, they have different values, different ways of handling children." But he wouldn't listen. "These people." The phrase hung in the air like poison gas, and Amara felt the familiar sting of racism dressed up as concern. She had heard those words before, in different contexts, from different mouths, but always carrying the same message: "You don't belong here." "That's enough." Thaddeus's voice boomed across the hallway, silencing the crowd momentarily. "Mrs. Hartwell, you have no idea what you're talking about." But Vivian wasn't finished. "Oh, but I do, Mr. Ashworth. I've done my research since this story broke. Did you know your precious housekeeper has a criminal record?" Amara's heart stopped. "What?" "A shoplifting charge from 10 years ago," Vivian announced triumphantly. "Stealing baby formula and diapers. Once a thief, always a thief, I say. And if she'll steal, what else is she capable of?" The crowd murmured with renewed interest, and Amara felt the fragile trust she and Thaddeus had built crumbling around her. She saw doubt flicker across his face, saw him step back slightly, and knew that Vivian's poison was already working. "I can explain," Amara began, but her voice was lost in the crowd's renewed hostility. "You stole from stores, and then you stole this man's trust," someone yelled. "Criminal. Liar." Thaddeus looked at Amara, his face a mask of confusion and hurt. "Is it true? Do you have a criminal record?" The question felt like a betrayal after everything they had shared in the mediation room. Amara saw the walls going back up in his eyes, saw him retreating into the safety of suspicion and prejudice. "Yes," she said quietly, her dignity intact even as her world collapsed. "I was arrested for shoplifting when Zoe was 2 years old. I was working minimum wage jobs, and she needed formula and diapers, and I took them." "You're a thief," Thaddeus said, his voice flat and cold. "I was a desperate mother trying to feed her child," Amara shot back, her own anger finally breaking through. "I paid for those items 3 times over in community service, and I never stole anything again. But I suppose that doesn't matter to you, does it? One mistake, 10 years ago, and suddenly everything I've done for your family means nothing. How can I trust someone who lies by omission?" "Lies by omission?" Amara's voice rose, drawing more attention from the crowd. "When exactly was I supposed to tell you? During my job interview? Hello, Mr. Ashworth, I'd like to care for your daughter, and by the way, I once stole baby formula because I couldn't afford to feed my own child. Or maybe during one of our many heart-to-heart conversations. Oh wait, we never had any because you never saw me as anything more than the help." The words hung between them like a chasm. Thaddeus felt the sting of truth in her accusation, but his pride and fear were stronger than his newfound understanding. "I think," he said slowly, each word carefully chosen to inflict maximum damage, "that it would be best if you stayed away from my daughter. Permanently." The crowd erupted in approval, but Amara heard nothing except the sound of her own heart breaking. She looked at this man who had just promised to help her rebuild her life, who had seemed to understand her pain and her love for Lily, and saw only another person who would abandon her when things got difficult. "You're just like all the rest," she said, her voice barely audible but carrying the weight of a lifetime's disappointments. "When it's convenient, you see my humanity. But the moment it costs you something, your reputation, your standing in this community, I become disposable again." She turned to walk away, but Thaddeus's voice stopped her. Amara, wait. No. She faced him one last time, tears streaming down her cheeks but her spine straight with dignity. You've made your choice, Mr. Ashworth. You've chosen your pride over your daughter's happiness, your reputation over the truth. I hope it keeps you warm at night when Lily cries herself to sleep asking for me. As Amara pushed through the hostile crowd toward the courthouse exit, Thaddeus stood frozen in the hallway, surrounded by people congratulating him for doing the right thing. But all he could think about was the look in Amara's eyes, not hatred, but profound disappointment in his cowardice. Dr. Vasquez appeared at his elbow, her face grim. Mr. Ashworth, I hope you realize what you've just done. I protected my family, he said, but the words sounded hollow even to his own ears. No, she replied quietly. You just broke your daughter's heart all over again. And this time you did it on purpose. As the crowd dispersed and the reporters moved on to their next story, Thaddeus Ashworth stood alone in the courthouse hallway, wondering if he had just made the second worst mistake of his life. The first, he was beginning to realize, had been letting fear make his decisions for him in the first place. The silence in Thornfield Heights was deafening. Thaddeus sat in his study, staring at the same contract he had been pretending to read for the past 3 hours. The numbers blurred together on the page, meaningless symbols that couldn't distract him from the weight of what he had done. It had been 18 hours since the courthouse confrontation, 18 hours since he had chosen his reputation over the woman who had loved his daughter unconditionally. The house felt different now, not just quiet, but hollow, as if something essential had been carved out of its very foundation. Mrs. Delacroix appeared in the doorway, her face etched with disapproval. Sir, Miss Lily still hasn't eaten. She's asking for Miss Amara again. Thaddeus closed his eyes, feeling the familiar stab of guilt. Tell her Miss Amara isn't coming back. I've told her that 6 times today, sir. She doesn't believe me. She says Miss Amara promised to never leave her, and Miss Amara doesn't break promises. The words hit like physical blows. Thaddeus thought of Lily's drawing, still tucked in his jacket pocket, the crayon family that he had destroyed with his cowardice. Perhaps, Mrs. Delacroix continued carefully, you might reconsider your decision. The staff has been talking, sir, and we all know Miss Amara would never hurt Miss Lily. What happened at the courthouse, that wasn't justice. It's done, Margaret. Thaddeus's voice was flat, emotionless. The decision is made. Mrs. Delacroix studied him for a long moment. Your wife would be ashamed of you. The words hung in the air like a slap. Thaddeus looked up sharply, but Mrs. Delacroix was already walking away, her disapproval radiating from every step. Alone again, Thaddeus pulled out his phone and scrolled through the news coverage of yesterday's events. The headlines were brutal. Billionaire's housekeeper exposed as criminal, child abuser's dark past revealed, Ashworth family vindicated. But reading them brought no satisfaction, only a growing sense of nausea. His phone buzzed with a text from his lawyer. Excellent work yesterday. The media coverage has been overwhelmingly positive. Your reputation is intact. Reputation. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. What good was a reputation built on destroying an innocent woman's life? A soft knock interrupted his brooding. Daddy. Lily stood in the doorway, still wearing her pajamas from the night before. Her hair was tangled, her face pale and streaked with dried tears. She looked smaller somehow, as if grief had physically diminished her. What is it, sweetheart? I had the dream again. The one where Mama comes back, but then she leaves again. Lily's voice was barely a whisper. I called for Miss Amara, but she didn't come. Mrs. Delacroix says she's not coming back ever. Is that true? Thaddeus felt his chest tighten. Yes, it's true. But why? Did I do something wrong? Did I make her mad? The innocent questions were torture. No, baby. You didn't do anything wrong. Then why won't she come back? She promised she would always be here for me. She promised she would sit with me through every storm. Lily's voice broke on the last word, and fresh tears began to fall. Thaddeus knelt down and pulled his daughter into his arms, feeling her small body shake with sobs. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, Lily. Sometimes they break promises they didn't mean to break. But Miss Amara doesn't make mistakes like that. She's careful with promises. She told me that promises are sacred, and you should only make them if you really, really mean them. The words were like knives in Thaddeus's heart. Amara had been careful with her promises, It was he who had broken them, who had shattered the sacred trust between his daughter and the woman who had become her mother in all but name. "Daddy, can we call her? Can we ask her to come home?" "I don't think she wants to come home, sweetheart." Lily pulled back to look at him, her green eyes blazing with the fierce intelligence she had inherited from both her parents. "That's not true. Miss Amara loves me. She told me so every day. Love doesn't just stop, Daddy. You taught me that when Mama died. You said her love for us would never go away, even though she couldn't be with us anymore." The child's logic was devastating in its simplicity. Thaddeus saw his own words reflected back at him, exposing the hypocrisy of his actions. "Miss Amara's love didn't go away either," Lily continued. "So if she's not coming back, it's because someone is stopping her. Is it you, Daddy? Are you the reason she can't come home?" The question hung between them like a judgment. Thaddeus looked into his daughter's eyes and saw not just Catherine's features, but Catherine's moral clarity, her ability to cut through pretense and see the truth. "Yes," he whispered. "It's me." Lily's face crumpled. "Why? Why would you keep her away from me?" How could he explain to a 7-year-old that he had been so consumed by his own fear and prejudice that he had destroyed the best thing in her life? How could he tell her that he had chosen the approval of strangers over her happiness? "Because I was scared," he said finally. "I was scared that if I let her love you, it would mean I wasn't a good enough daddy." "But you are a good daddy," Lily said, her small hands cupping his face. "And Miss Amara never tried to replace you. She just wanted to help you take care of me. She said that's what families do, they help each other." Families. The word echoed in Thaddeus's mind, bringing with it the memory of Lily's drawing, of Amara's gentle explanation of what family really meant. "Daddy, I need Miss Amara. I need her like I need you. Can you please bring her home?" Thaddeus looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw the depth of her pain, the way her spirit had dimmed in Amara's absence. He thought of Catherine's final words, her plea for him to take care of their daughter. He thought of Amara's promise to his dying wife, her commitment to love Lily through every storm. And he thought of the choice that lay before him. Continue down the path of pride and prejudice, or find the courage to admit he had been wrong. His phone buzzed again. Another congratulatory message from someone praising him for protecting his family. But as he looked at Lily's tear-stained face, he realized he had done the exact opposite. He had failed to protect the person who mattered most. "Lily," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "What if I told you that Daddy made a terrible mistake? What if I told you that I hurt Miss Amara very badly, and she might not want to forgive me? Miss Amara has a big heart," Lily said with the certainty of a child who had been loved unconditionally. "If you tell her you're sorry and you really mean it, she'll forgive you. That's what love does." Thaddeus felt something shift inside his chest, a loosening of the fear and pride that had held him captive for so long. His daughter was right. Love forgave, love healed, love chose courage over comfort. "Then I guess," he said, standing up with new determination, "I need to go find Miss Amara and tell her how sorry I am." Lily's face lit up with the first genuine smile he had seen from her in days. "Can I come with you?" "I think," Thaddeus said, taking his daughter's hand, "that she needs to hear from both of us." As they walked toward the door together, Thaddeus felt the weight of his mistakes still heavy on his shoulders. But for the first time since Catherine's death, he also felt something else: hope. The choice had been made. Now came the harder part, living with the consequences and praying that love really was stronger than pride. Amara Baptiste sat on the small balcony of her apartment, watching the sun set over Willowbrook's modest downtown. The past 24 hours felt like a lifetime, from the hope of reconciliation to the crushing humiliation at the courthouse. Her phone had been ringing constantly with reporters seeking comments, but she had turned it off hours ago, needing silence to process the wreckage of her life. The sound of car doors slamming in the parking lot below barely registered until she heard a familiar voice calling her name. "Miss Amara. Miss Amara, please." Amara's heart stopped. She leaned over the balcony railing and saw Lily Ashworth standing beside a black Mercedes, her small hands cupped around her mouth as she called upward. Thaddeus stood behind her, his face a mixture of determination and terror. "Lily," Amara called down, her voice cracking with emotion. "Miss Amara." Lily's face lit up like sunrise. "I knew you were here. I told Daddy you wouldn't leave without saying goodbye. Amara looked at Thaddeus, searching his face for some explanation. He met her gaze and mouthed a single word. Please. 5 minutes later, Amara opened her apartment door to find Lily launching herself forward in a fierce hug that nearly knocked her over. The child's arms wrapped around her waist with desperate strength, as if she could prevent any future separations through sheer force of will. I missed you so much, Lily sobbed into Amara's shirt. The house is so quiet without you. Even the flowers in the garden look sad. Amara knelt down to Lily's level, her own tears flowing freely. I missed you too, little star. More than you could ever know. Thaddeus stood awkwardly in the doorway, taking in the modest apartment that was smaller than his walk-in closet, but filled with warmth his mansion lacked. Photos of a beautiful little girl, Zoe, smiled from every surface, and children's books were stacked neatly on shelves beside medical textbooks and poetry collections. May I come in? He asked quietly. Amara hesitated, then stepped aside. Lily, sweetheart, why don't you look at the books on that shelf while your daddy and I talk? Lily reluctantly released her hold on Amara, but stayed close, settling on the small couch with a picture book about butterflies. Thaddeus and Amara stood facing each other in the tiny living room, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between them like a chasm. I came to apologize, Thaddeus began, his voice rough with emotion, and to tell you that I've been the biggest fool who ever lived. Thaddeus. No, please. Let me say this. He took a shaky breath. Yesterday, when that woman brought up your past, I let fear make my decisions again. I let the opinions of people who don't matter destroy something precious. I let my own cowardice hurt the two people I should protect most, you and Lily. Amara remained silent, her arms crossed protectively over her chest. I called the district attorney this morning, Thaddeus continued. I told him I was dropping all charges and that any prosecutor who pursued this case would face a lawsuit for malicious prosecution. I also called every news outlet that covered the story and gave them a statement. He pulled out his phone and showed her a news article with the headline, Billionaire admits mistake, praises housekeeper's heroism. I told them the truth, he said. That you saved my daughter's life, that you've been the best thing to happen to our family since Catherine died, and that anyone who believes otherwise is a fool. Amara read the article, her eyes widening at the quotes attributed to Thaddeus. Amara Baptiste is a hero who has loved my daughter unconditionally. My accusations were born from grief and fear, not facts. She deserves not just an apology, but recognition for the extraordinary woman she is. The story is already trending, Thaddeus said. By tomorrow, everyone will know the truth. And what about my criminal record? Amara asked quietly. What about the fact that I'm just the help, who doesn't belong in your world? Thaddeus flinched at his own words thrown back at him. Your past doesn't define you, Amara. Your actions do. And your actions have been nothing but loving, selfless, and brave. As for not belonging in my world, he paused, gathering courage. I don't want you in my world. I want to be in yours. Amara looked at him in confusion. Your world, he continued, where love matters more than money, where promises are sacred, where a child's happiness is worth more than a reputation. I want to learn how to live in that world, Amara. I want you to teach me. From the couch, Lily looked up from her book. Miss Amara, Daddy has something else to ask you. Thaddeus shot his daughter a look of surprise, but Lily just smiled encouragingly. We talked about it in the car, she explained. Daddy said he wanted to ask you something important, but he was scared you'd say no. Amara looked between father and daughter, seeing the family resemblance not just in their features, but in their shared vulnerability. What did you want to ask me? She said softly. Thaddeus took a deep breath. I want to ask if you'll come home. Not as an employee, but as family. I want to ask if you'll help me raise Lily, if you'll let me learn how to be the father she deserves. I want to ask if you'll give us another chance to be the family Catherine always wanted us to be. The words hung in the air like a prayer. Amara felt her heart racing, hope and fear warring in her chest. And what happens the next time someone questions my place in your family? The next time your reputation is threatened by association with me? Then I'll tell them the same thing I told the reporters today, Thaddeus said firmly. That you're not just part of our family, you're the heart of it. And anyone who has a problem with that can go to hell. Lily gasped. Daddy said a bad word. Despite everything, Amara found herself smiling. Yes, he did. But sometimes grown-ups say bad words when they're trying to say something really important. She looked at Thaddeus, seeing not the arrogant billionaire who had accused her of abuse, but a broken man who had found the courage to admit his mistakes and fight for what mattered. There's something you need to understand, she said. If I come back, things will be different. I won't be invisible anymore. I won't pretend that my opinions don't matter or that my love for Lily is somehow less valid because I'm not her biological mother. I wouldn't want you to, Thaddeus said. I want Lily to see what real strength looks like. I want her to learn from the woman who taught me that love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, even when it's hard. Lily jumped up from the couch and ran to them, taking both their hands in hers. So we're a family again? A real family? Amara looked down at the little girl who had become her heart, then at the man who had learned to see past his own fear to the truth that mattered most. Yes, little star, she said, her voice thick with emotion. We're a family. A real family. As they embraced in the small apartment, three broken people made whole by love and forgiveness, Amara thought of Catherine's final words and Zoe's memory. Both would live on in this imperfect, beautiful family they had chosen to create. Outside, the sun finished setting over Willowbrook, but inside Amara's apartment, a new day was just beginning. What does family mean to you? Is it about blood, or is it about the people who choose to love you unconditionally? Share your thoughts about what makes a real family in the comments below.